بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير، الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور، الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما تري في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت، فارجع البصر هل تري من فطور، ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير، ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير، وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ، كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير، قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير، فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير، فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور، ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. آمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور، أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you all for coming to our Arbaeen lecture series entitled From Traditional Ijtihād to Collective Ijtihād, a Natural Progression. This year's lecture series is sponsored on behalf of the marhumeen displayed on the TV screen outside the chapel. If we can please all recite a Surah Fatiha for these and all other marhumeen. If you would like to donate towards the Arbaeen lecture series, you can do so at the table by the main entrance, where we also have our latest publications for sale, including Shaykh Arif's latest book in the Islam and God Centricity series titled Discovering God. Just a quick health and safety note: in case of an emergency, the fire exits are located at the back of the chapel, the main entrance outside the chapel, and the double doors by the dining room. Please note that tomorrow night's program will start at 7:30 p.m. with Dua Kumail, Namaz, Quran, lecture by Sheikh Arif, Matam, Ziyara, Q&A, and ending with Niyaz. If you do have any questions from the series, please send them online at www.ami.is/QA. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Sheikh Arif to deliver tonight's lecture. So can I request you all to please move forward and welcome him with the salawat.
Can we recite Amma Yujib for the shafa of a person who is extremely unwell and for the well-being of all those who are unwell? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. And we have lost a very dear member of the community. For her maghfirah and maghfirah of all our marhumin, Surah Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. So, continuing with the discussion, I'll just briefly recap that taklif in the context of our discussion is imposition by God of duties upon the faithful. There is an assumption here that God only imposes those regulations that are beneficial in the sense of making them obligatory. God prohibits only those things that are absolutely detrimental. And then God encourages and discourages from other acts. And in certain areas, God does not issue any ordinances, leaves and gives us a free hand. That's the brief understanding, although there's much more debate in there. So these regulations are value-based because God realizes the values. He sees in His mind or wisdom that 5 times a day appearing before Him with that specific prayer that the Prophet taught is absolutely beneficial and hence is unavoidable. So He makes that an obligation upon us. He sees interest as absolutely detrimental for a functioning of a just, moral, and a virtuous society. So He makes interest haram. I'm going to be revisiting that in a little while. But you get the idea. So all these ahkam that Allah is giving through the Sharia have got values within them that God has seen. Traditionally, taklif becomes obligatory at the age of puberty, which is set for boys at 14 and for girls at 9, provided that they are sane. Sanity means they are not classified as insane. The major assumption that the traditional camp has is that the regulations revealed within the Quran and given by the Prophet as they were are true and carrying all those values from that time till the day of Qiyamah. These regulations are, in other words, immutable. They will not change. 2, they are universal. They apply to every region of the earth. So if the Quran says, fast from dawn to sunset, then that rule stands till the day of Qiyamah, regardless of the region of the world in which you may reside. At the age of 9 for girls, and at the age of 13, 14 for boys. The assumption here is that that literal understanding, or apparent understanding as they call it, contains the values that God envisaged. That's a recap on the traditional camp. Existentially, the values captured by God at the time of revelation were contingent to that time. Beyond that time, there is a change in the human condition. We are growing in a very multifaceted way. We are growing intellectually. Women are actualizing their potential. They are no longer illiterate. They can apprehend an event, retain it in their minds, and adequately convey it in the form of bearing a testimony. So whereas before, where there was a rule of 2 women equaling 1 man, when it comes to testimonies, the rule was based on the aptitudes of the women of that time along the horizontal axis. And I hope you remember what the horizontal axes are, where people are grouped in different regions. There, they were not really accustomed to retaining knowledge. Today, women are scientists, medics, prime ministers, presidents. We haven't seen a president, we've seen prime ministers, right? So now these women can retain information accurately. They will not be seeing one thing and emotionally interpreting something else. They have actualized their inner potential or intellectual potential. So that rule of 1 man or 2 women to 1 man, in certain regions where women have had the opportunity to actualize their intellectual potential, will no longer carry the value that was initially envisaged in 2 women, 1 man ratio. Now the value will be different, and the mind of God will have that value. However, what God conveyed was in words, and those words were captured in a phase of history, and they cannot change. The Quran is unchanging in that way. Of course, the depths of the Quran are alive, but the literal word of the Quran is unchanging. It was captured 1,400 years ago. So the Quranic rule is 2 women to 1 man. Yet the value has changed. So existentially, the values are constantly changing. If the values are constantly changing, then the forms have to change with the values in order to accommodate what God envisaged from the human community, and that was the creation of a just, moral, and virtuous human community. So I'm going to just emphasize this again. Man having the right to discipline their wives on the basis that men were providers and has existential merit. I don't want to use complicated words here. Now, in many regions of the earth, women have actualized their intellectual potential. They can think, they can earn. Earning is no longer contingent to hard labor and tilling the land. Commerce is done on computers now, behind the screens. We no longer need to carry arms and fight wars. Jihad was incumbent upon man back in the day, and hence they had that merit of physical strength. Now we are flying drones. In the future world, wars may be conducted, and I hope we stop all warfare, but it seems highly unlikely, at least in the next couple of centuries. But in a future world, drones will be fighting each other. And at that point, a woman may be able to control a drone plane far better than a man, or as equal to a man. So that existential merit is no longer with the man. Now, when the existential aptitude changes, the values in those laws are no longer being carried forward. So those laws need to be changed. Now, I do want to build on something important today, but I can see how excited you are, so I'll give one more example. Yeah? If you look at societal regulations, men were providers for women. They tilled the land. They fought jihad. As a result, they had the right to divorce. Women today are providers. They do not need their man to provide for them. They are equal contributors. So the nature of contract, marriage contract, changes in accordance with the contribution of each party within the marital setup. If they come in as equal, as it is the case in this country, then woman has an equal right to divorce at will. That value envisaged by God 1,400 years ago in the revelatory era, or the era of the Prophet, is no longer being carried by the law of unilateral sort of right of man to divorce his wife. So therefore, the law will need to be tweaked. So existentially, the regulations are concerned with conveying their essences. The forms, if they become obsolete and do not produce or do not retain their effectivity or efficacy, they are not effective in producing the results, then those forms lose their optimality and need to be tweaked. Now that's a brief recap from yesterday. Now we said all of these regulations are known as taklif. Appreciation of this taklif leads to ijtihād. Whoever endeavors to understand independently what the taklif is conducting ijtihād. Whoever does not have the time or the ability to conduct ijtihād follows the one who does ijtihād, and that's known as muqallid, and that is taklid. So taklif is the basis of taklid and ijtihād. Now taklid, what does it mean rationally? You can open the books of the fuqaha, they will all say at the very beginning that it's a rational obligation. I'm going to come back to another argument in a little while, that taklid is a rational obligation. But what does rational obligation mean? Rational obligation means is that reason tells us that I have a duty. I don't know how to execute that duty. Obviously, I have to refer to someone who is qualified and who can tell me how to execute that duty. Rationally, taklid means, not taklid. Rationally, the basis of taklid is reference of the one who does not know to the one who does know. Now, conventionally, in human behavior, what taklid translates as is uncritical acceptance of the opinion of another, provided we see this as expert, whether it's one or many, whether it's through accepting the uncritically accepting the opinion, or sometimes we can consult with them. All of this fall in taklid. So for example, if somebody is unwell, they can go to a doctor, they trust that doctor, the physician will say, this is your condition, this is what I prescribe for you, and they will say, I trust you enough, I don't want to know anymore, and I will abide by the regime that you've given me. That's taklid uncritical. At other times, a person might say, well, why are you prescribing this medicine to me, or this course of medicine? There, it's slightly critical. At other times, we will say, well, I need a second opinion. But in all of these instances, it is known as referring to another. But by and large, because of the way the human society is organized, we normally take taklid in our daily lives as uncritical acceptance of accurate knowledge from its source. That's what we assume. So you come to me and you say, Arif, what is the Sharia rule for this? And I'll tell you, and you will never ask me. That's not in my case, that never happens. Actually, people ask me for all sorts of evidences. But normally, we go to a Maulana and we say, Maulana, I've done this, what's the kafara, expiation? Maulana will say, feed 60 people, and we'll say, that's fine, I'll feed 60 people, I trust your knowledge base. That's uncritical acceptance of the opinion of another on the basis that it's an accurate opinion. So taklid is all about receiving the most accurate opinion, accurate understanding of taklif. That's the bottom line in taklid. Now, historically, within the Shias, taklid was never wajib. If you look at the books of Shaykh Tusi, and then down the line, Muhakkik Hilli, their debates center around the permissibility of taklid. So they were debating taklid as being permissible or non-permissible. Is it permissible to do taklid? Is it not permissible to do taklid? Because I'm not talking about the akhbari and the usuli tension that we had in the Safavid era 400 plus ago, that in all that era of 100 or 200 years. I'm talking about much before this. Taklid was already there. But the debate around taklid was about its permissibility. Later on, over about 200 years ago, after Shaykh Ansari, the whole issue became taklid is wajib. Taklid has to be wajib, otherwise, every act of, I'm going to use this word, don't get offended, every act of the laity, because that's how it's said, Ammi, laity, yes, is void. This came in 200 plus years ago, and after that, that's been the trend. But before that, they were debating whether taklid is permissible or not. It's the same debates that our Sunni brothers have had. Is it permissible or not? Initially. Now, I want to discuss first thing here is that what does wajib mean here? You see, it's very deceptive. We are using the word wajib, and I've used the word as the bottom line being rational necessity. You see, when you say something is wajib, that term is baggaged. If I don't do it, I'm sinning. Yeah? Namaz is wajib. If you don't pray, you are sinning, right? Is taklid wajib in the same way? Nobody in their right mind will tell you taklid is wajib in that way. So why is taklid wajib? And why is taklid wajib? This needs to be understood. Taklid is wajib because if without taklid actions are committed, the actions will not be valid. And if the actions are not valid, then the individual will have no absolution or excuse in front of God. And therefore, due to not performing taklif duties, they will go to hell. Can you see that? So it's not wajib to go to the doctor. But if you get sick, then you will be blameworthy. By not going to the doctor, you're not committing a sin in that way. But by not going to an expert, if you begin to then incur damage and detriment to your body or damages caused to others, then you have no means of excusability or absolution, or you have no excuse. So taklid is wajib indirectly. Can you see that? So we asked them, why is taklid wajib? Now Kazim Tabatabai Yazdi has given this argument, and by the way, Dr. Fatimi is sitting at the back there, a very illustrious and a person and an erudite. Ask him all the questions on the history of taklid and everything. Don't look towards me at all, okay? That's the man. And I'm very honored to be in his presence. So why is it wajib? So Kazim Tabatabai Yazdi in his Al-Urwatul Wuthqa about 200 years ago gives this particular notion that, well, in devotions, you are standing in your prayers and you're saying, I'm praying. By the way, have you noticed this? That all of us speak English, but at the time of niyat, we do it in Urdu. I've seen so many people who don't speak anything but English, but the niyat has to be in Urdu. In any case, we say, Qurbatan ilallahi ta'ala. Now, Qurbatan ilallah means I am making a claim that I am performing this prayer in the way in which I am going to perform to gain proximity to Allah. Now, Allah is asking you in return, how do you know this is the form of prayer that I have ordained? You say, well, I don't know. Well, then how can you make the intention of Qurbatan ilallah? Are you seeing the technical point here? I am claiming, I'm standing before you, God, and I'm praying this namaz to get close to you because you have ordained it in the way in which I'm going to perform. The question comes, how do you know I have ordained it in the way you're going to perform it right now? Well, I don't know. Well, then how can you say Qurbatan ilallah? So without taklid, you can't make the intention of qurba. Put more simply, taklid is reference to knowledge. When you make accurate reference to knowledge through ordained sources of knowledge, even if it's wrong, you can be excused in front of God. Say, well, you ordained this. He was wrong. I just followed. He's taken the burden from me. I'm going to explain that in a minute. But it's not so far-fetched, this meaning. Think about it. We go to court. Yes? We are charged with council tax evasion. If only you understood Freud's theories, you will know why I'm giving these examples. I was in Iran and I was charged with council tax. I wasn't even here in this country. Anyway, they made me pay. So you go to court for council tax evasion. You say to the court, I went onto the government website, yes? And it is written clearly there, and this is my evidence. On that day, I took a screenshot of what your website said. And it said, if you're a priest, there's no council tax. Now he'll say, well, that's a ludicrous law. I'll say, well, it's on your website, it's official website. And the judge will say, yeah, you followed the right means. So you are excused for not paying council tax. So it's not council tax evasion at all. You did not know any better, but you did your due diligence. Can you see that? That's a sort of argument, right? I'm going to build on this greatly, so bear with me. So now, what does taklid mean, therefore, according to this, making reference to a valid source? Taklid means vesting responsibility upon another. But the word qalada means to place a necklace on the neck of a woman. It also means to place a collar upon somebody's neck. And in the Quran, it is used for qala'id, the sacrificial animals that were given the symbol of a hanging slipper around their neck. And qalada, they have been collared, yeah, to make it apparent that I'm going to sacrifice this camel at the end of my Hajj pilgrimage. So qalada means to put the yoke of responsibility upon the neck of another. Whose neck do you put the responsibility? The person who stretches out his neck. Who is the one who stretches out his neck? The one who gives opinion. And we have a hadith of Imam Sadiq as well, whoever gives an opinion bears the responsibility. But in any case, when a mujtahid gives a set of ruling, the mujtahid effectively has stretched out his neck, that I'm ready to bear responsibility. And we place the yoke or the collar of responsibility upon the neck of the mujtahid, and in front of God we are now absolved by acting in accordance with the edict of that mujtahid. That is the meaning of taklid. Now, if I get anything wrong, it's this man's fault. Nothing to do with me. And it makes sense in that way, but I'm going to be unraveling this in a little while. But for now, it makes sense that you go to court, you say, look, I went to this barrister, ordained barrister, he advised me this way, I did exactly that, he was totally wrong, what am I supposed to do? Yeah, the responsibility is of the barrister. You're absolved. Yeah, it's fine. So, as I said, I want to develop this. What are the conditions of a mufti or muqallad, the one upon whose neck the yoke has been placed, or mujtahid? He has to be a man. He has to be sane, obviously. I mean, you can't go and do taklid of a madman. He has to be a believer. He has to be a believer. He has to be legitimate of birth. He has to be just. There are a few other things here and there that are not really essential conditions. Now, here's the question I ask. But rationally, taklid is making reference to accurate knowledge. I know for a fact that AI is not a man. It's not legitimate of birth or illegitimate of birth. It's not a believer or a disbeliever. It doesn't have any of those properties. But AI will give me more accurate understanding of taklid than 100 mujtahids put together in one shot. You put 100 mujtahids together, if you fine-tune AI and give them collective information of all the sources, of all the methodologies of mujtahideen, one AI can shut our shop down, can make us all redundant, and that's a fact. So here you ask, accuracy of information or these conditions? Then I ask again, why do you think the Imam said, follow a man? What if a woman, you know for a fact has understood an issue, a taklif, far more accurately than a man. And I know that she's understood it far more accurately than a man. Yet I'm obliged to follow a man. And then on the day of Qiyamah, Allah will say, well, you knew she was far more accurate than this man. Why did you follow the man? So, well, no, you told me, you ordained that I should follow this man. I said, God will say, when did I ordain that you follow a man? I ordained you follow accuracy of understanding. The only thing is that back in the day, women were not accomplished as jurists and judges. And that's why it was only confined to a man. Can you see this? So now we will say, A'lam. There are two issues I have here. Why A'lam, the most learned? Because it has to be most accurately sourced. Can you not see? The rational judgment is accurate appreciation of taklif. And that impels us to place a condition that you have to source taklif from the most learned. So AI is most learned now. I'm giving you a scenario. Or a woman is most learned in a particular facet. Or a kafir is most learned in some transactional rules. So here, why should I follow somebody who is less than most learned and avoid the most learned? Obviously, according to this line of reasoning, I will be trouble in front of God. Can you see that? We see conflation here. That because these rules were devised as we came along, and because it was a very male-dominated society, the hadith that we refer to are all about man. But at the base of all of these ahadith is accuracy of knowledge. So what the imams were doing, and later on fuqaha, they were giving us extensions, mere extensions of what is the place for most accurate knowledge. So they were giving extensions, not that marja A is most accurate in and of himself. They're saying in the world in which you are right now, only men have the grasp of understanding the taklif, not women, because by and large they are uneducated. Can you see that? I'm going to just give an example here. When our Bibi Fatima Salamullah alayha, now I've read this, I don't know if it's polemical or if it's factual, but it's nonetheless the example is quite solid. When she went to Khalifa Abu Bakr to claim fadak, I read that Khalifa asked for another female witness as per the instruction of the Quran. But this is very offensive. It's extremely offensive. Because if the whole of the entirety of the minds of Ummah were put together, they would not equal her mind. She was that accurate. She was endowed with that light of the Blessed Prophet. So for him to ask her to bring another woman, we all agree, was very wrong. Because in her case, we have no doubt. So when we know that she will never lie, the whole equation of two female to one male falls in her case. We are basing it on values and essence. Can you see that? In taklid, the essence is accuracy of knowledge. Being a man was just an extension. But if you can ascertain accuracy of knowledge within a woman, then we will have to, by rash reason, go refer towards a woman, right? It's as simple as that. The other problem that we find here is that in their debate, the traditional scholarship has conflated two things: Ijtihād and religious leadership. We will see that the arguments that are there are at some point looking at Ijtihād and another point looking at leadership of the Muslim community. So yes, you can say leadership of the Muslim community has to be male-oriented, fine. They have to be legitimate of birth, fine. They have to be Muslim, because you can't have a kafir leading a Muslim community. Can you see that? So you find that they have conflated conditions of a leader of a Muslim community with the conditions of a mufti, because they did not distinguish between the two. So we are finding here that there are huge problems. But now, even if we were to take the traditional camp on, On their terms, we can ask a massive question that they can't respond to. When they say A'lam, you ask them, what does A'lam mean? They say most learned. You ask them, most learned in every individual edict and fatwa, or most learned in their methodology? They are lost. Because if they say most learned in their methodology, you can say, well, most learned in methodology does not ensure accuracy of each and every fatwa, because they may not be able to apply it accurately everywhere. If you were to say in each and every edict, then nobody in their right mind would make that claim that one marja is more learned than the whole of the rest of the world in the thousands of edicts that are there. You can't, so it's unascertainable. So you can see that the whole model collapses. But it was good. It served its purpose. And that was the only way it could have been at that point. There was no other way of making it. It's like in this institute. If all the staff are male members and female are just temporary staff, the person in charge can say, if you want to know about the rules and regulations of the institute, ask any male member of the staff. Can you see that? Because there aren't any female members of the staff. But in 10 years' time, when women predominate on this institute, don't say inshallah, I don't mind equality, but not predominance. Yes? In 10 years' time, when women predominate on this institute, and you only have 2 or 3 male members, that instruction cannot be followed literally, because you will say the whole purpose behind that instruction was to accurately direct the people towards those people who are physically there. But the whole value was somebody who is working here and who knows the ins and outs of the institute. So if a woman knows it, then go to a woman as well. Can you see that? So back in the day, only men were able to have that time and the space and the opportunity to do ijtihad. Yeah? Now, existentially, taklid means, in practice, ascertaining the most accurate appreciation of taklif, be it by reference to a mujtahid and uncritical imitation, be it by reference to 10 different mujtahids, be it through imitation, be it through consultation, be it through mujtahid and non-mujtahid, be it through mujtahid and artificial intelligence. Existentially, taklid only means to get the most accurate appreciation of taklif. And that is the thing that absolves us in front of God. So when we stand before God, we will say to God, well, I tried my best with whatever was available to me to try and understand your intent, and that is what I came out with. And you're absolved. Because accuracy of appreciation of taklif is the bottom line. So existentially, taklid means it's not wajib to be bind yourself to one mujtahid or 10 mujtahid or 20. There's none of those things are necessary. It's just the appreciation of taklif. So it's not wajib to do taklid at all in that sense. It's just a rational necessity. If you were to look at the scenario of form in essence existentially, then what is the meaning of validity and invalidity existentially? Validity of an act and invalidity of an act is not dependent on who you follow. It's dependent on its result, expected objective. So if you go to a shop and you want to buy a bottle of milk, you make payment, and you take the bottle of milk, there is exchange of property and legal ownership of each other's goods. So now whether you say it in Arabic, bi'tu wa ashtaraytu, or you pay on credit card, you pay on cash, whatever you do, as long as there's transference of commodities, the effect of that transaction is there. As soon as the effect of that transaction is there, transaction is valid. You don't have to do taklid for that. Can you see that? What about namaz and fasting? The essence of namaz is, the Quran says, Inna salah tanha anil fahsha wal munkar. That salah prevents you from indecency and that which is reprehensible. The Prophet was asked, how do I know my salah has been accepted, my namaz? The Prophet said, if you become a better person, your namaz has been accepted. Otherwise, it's not. Imam Ali was asked, he repeated what the Prophet said, that if you are moved away from indecency and all the things that are reprehensible, then that namaz is accepted. So according to the Prophet, according to the Quran, according to Imam Ali, the acceptance of namaz is not by doing taklid and doing stable sajdas and rukus, although I agree, uniformity is needed in the form, don't get me wrong. But the acceptance of namaz is contingent on the desired effect of the namaz. So if you become a better person, you mispronounce dad and zad and whatever, one madda here and one kasra there and fatah, it's irrelevant. The essence is attained. Whether you like it or not, you become a better person, and there you go, the salat has been accepted internally. Whether you do taklid or not. Acceptance of a fast. According to us guys, if the waist shrinks, the fast has been accepted. According to the religious community, if you do taklid, the fast has been accepted. According to the Quran, if you do fast and you're still swearing and cursing and still as greedy and non-reliant on God, that fast has gone to waste. Because the Quran says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Fast has been prescribed upon you so that you may become God mindful in there, that the soul may be refined. You lessen your greed. You become more reliant upon God. You watch what you're saying, you watch what you're thinking, you watch what you're feeling. If that happens, the fast has been accepted. Didn't Imam Ali say, Salamullah alayh, how many are those who who fast for days on end only to inherit hunger and nothing else? How many are those who stand vigilant in prayers throughout their nights and the only thing they get are swollen feet? And how many are those who read Quran throughout the night and the Quran curses them? Can you see this? Existentially, it's about the essence, not the form. Form is required for uniformity's sake, and form has existential values, and I don't have the time to explain here, but next year in Canada, if Allah so wills. But form is not something that existential system is hung up on. It's concerned with essence. Then you are asked here, existentially, do we need ijtihad in all the things that a mujtahid does ijtihad? Say, of course you don't need it. Societal regulations do not require ijtihad of a mujtahid or anybody. Societal regulations are based on the precepts of justice. That's what the Quran says. The system of rights, interactions, marriage, divorce, so on and so forth, are based on the notion of justice, as we explained yesterday. Justice means to give, existentially, to give everything its rightful due. Yes? So if a couple is coming into marriage, and in the, let's say, Islamic state, where man is the provider, justice is to give the man an upper hand. If a couple is coming into marriage within UK, justice is to give them both equal rights in marriage. So in societal regulations, you don't need taklid and ijtihad beyond ijtihad that is and taklid that is being done of our civil system. Now there is another scenario. Existentially, if a fatwa doesn't sit well and it's inconsistent with the Quran or moral values or virtue, then that fatwa is not to be followed. Why? Because God will say on the day of Qiyamah, you knew in there that thing doesn't make sense. So now in the 70s, we had a fatwa that we can steal from this state and the people of this state because they're not Muslims. Now that fatwa was based Not because the mujtahid was evil, because his method was based on understanding that the world is either a Muslim world or a world at peace with Muslim or a land that is antagonistic to the Muslims. The land that is antagonistic to the Muslim is known as Darul Harb, the land of warfare. Now, if you're in the land of warfare, your duty is what? To weaken them. Or they have no sacredness. This leads to the fatwa that you can steal from them. So we used to witness in the 70s insurance, sort of fraudulent insurance claims. Mohammed Bhai, am I accurate? Mohammed Bhai, am I accurate? Yeah. People stealing from non-Muslims' credit cards, making international phone calls on other people's. I've witnessed this personally myself. Not paying bus fare, not paying train fare, making false claims of insurance on cars by setting them alight. All of this, Sistani Sahib came and ruled it all out. But before, now that fatwa, you know it's immoral. You know it's immoral. It's wrong. Whether the fatwa says something or not, if you know better within, it's haram for you to do it. Fatwa cannot legitimize it. Even if somebody is following the traditional system, you can't do it. The Quran says, frowning upon the Jewish community of the time, that the Jews were saying that the Gentiles have no sacredness, so we can cheat them and do whatever we want with them. And the Quran frowns upon this and taunts them. The fatwa was doing the same thing. We were saying that the non-Muslims have no sacredness. We can do whatever we want to them. They have no recourse upon us and there's no blame or sin. It's against decency, human values, dignity, human nobility, and human virtue. So such a fatwa is redundant. Now, what about the fatwa of marrying young girls? It's inconsistent with human rights. It's inconsistent with human dignity. It's inconsistent with human nobility. But the fatwa is there. Apart from maybe Sanei and one or two others, all of the Marajas are saying you can marry based on what? Not because they're silly, that they're evil people, because they are following the word of the law that came in the Sunnah of the Prophet and the statement of the Imams later on to the letter. It's not their fault, it's their method, because they're saying that those were the takalif and they are eternal till the day of Qiyamah and they are unchanging. But if in taklid, whether existentially somebody gives a view or in the traditional model, if something is so ridiculously, absurdly inconsistent with human virtue and dignity and morality, then obviously following it will get us into trouble. Not following it will probably put us in an accurate position with God. Beating of wives. Shares of khums at present, because the Shias don't pay zakat anymore. How can the Prophet ordain a class system within his community when he came to get rid of class distinctions, black and white and free and slaves, and he got rid of all of them? And the Quran is so direct, there is no distinction between a man and another. And the Prophet was so clear. How can the fatwa say give 50% to, let's say, 10 million people and 50% to 200 million people? Where is the justice in that? Absolutely absurd, this fatwa. So even if taklid said something, following it will get us into trouble. Slaves and concubines. According to the traditional model, they are all valid today. The only thing is the Muslims don't have the ability to take slaves anymore. But by principal law, it's valid. Nobody will say it's abrogated. Nobody can abrogate the law of the Quran because it has finality. Or 19-hour fast for young children or children who have reached puberty at the age of 9 lunar years and 13 for girls and boys respectively. It's a ludicrous fatwa, sorry for that use. It's an incomprehensible fatwa. It doesn't make any sense. Or traveling and breaking fast at a distance of 28 miles. I remember Muhammad Bhai, and we en masse, we used to travel, remember, on the night of Eid. Just imagine if somebody tipped off the police that these are all terrorists. They're going to go on the borders of Birmingham and they're going to do something nasty. So, once the police met us, they said, "Why have you come here?" I said, "Well, to break our fast." They said, "And what does that mean?" I said, "Well, we can't break it there." So, "Where do you live?" "In Birmingham." Okay, so you had to come here to have a cup of tea. I said, "Yeah." We came here to have, he said, "Okay, whatever, I mean, the police are not going to argue with you." They said, "Okay, these are religious people, they know what they're doing." He converted to Islam after that. Or tawaf between the house of God and Maqam Ibrahim. You're going to break your ribs. For crying out loud, 3 million people going in and squeezing in that place. Maybe it's better to be squashed in the... No, I'm not going to say that because at least anybody says Ameen. Or animal sacrifice at Hajj. It doesn't serve any purpose. The essence of animal sacrifice in the Quran is feeding the Hujjaj in Mina and to celebrate the name of God as opposed to the names of idols. Today, nobody is going to go and cook that meat. It's a burden to take that meat home with you. Yeah? It's a burden. And two, nobody celebrates the name of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The whole cause of the law has gone. There is no cause of the law left. So now, the law is this, that I will not eat that meat. The Quran says, eat from it and feed the poor and the needy. I'm not going to feed the poor or the needy in Mina because there's abundance of food. And celebrate the name of God as opposed to names of other deities. I'm not celebrating animals, but in order for me to fulfill an obligation, 1 million of us will go from around the world into Mina, slaughter animals, and say, that's it, we've done our obligation. Obviously, it has to have some value, as we said. There are values. What value does this serve? And then tons of meat rots away. I mean, even though they've got abattoirs, which is a good thing, but the thing is, rather than going to Makkah, slaughtering the meat, having it tinned, and then sending it back to poor countries, why can't we, if we want to give animals, why can't we just give it to the poor countries straight away? Isn't it a bit silly to go from here to Makkah, sacrifice the animal there, and then that animal is shipped back here? The cost is 5 times more. If you want to pay that much money, then feed 5 times more people in the country where it's going in the first place. Isn't that more value for money and closer to piety and the value that Allah has envisaged? In any case, these are lengthy debates, but ICCI has given a paper on that. Please do read it. Read these papers. But anyway, that's through existential scheme and through form and essence. And I'm going to give you one more example. 2 Eids in the same household. Which mind can make sense of this fatwa? When one mujtahid says that the older generation who has followed the previous mujtahid continue following him, and the younger generation, their children, who are not at the age of puberty, who are following me, have to follow my rule. According to the previous grand mujtahid, the Eid is 1 day early. According to me, it's 1 day late. So every household has to do 2 Eids. What about social Islam? Eid is supposed to be one congregation, if not for the whole world, then at least for one country. Here we are finding, even in one household, by the force of fatwa, there are 2 Eids. And the followers of the previous mujtahid cannot change to the new one, and the followers of the new one can't go to the previous one. It's a deadlock. How does that make sense to anybody? So even in the traditional model, if somebody wants to abide by it, something that is nonsensical cannot be validated through taklid because responsibility is in front of God. Yes? I'm going to give the bottom line now and finish. So the bottom line is that taklid is a rational necessity in securing accurate understanding of taklif. The traditional model has been mujtahid, male, centered, alam. The existential model is accuracy of knowledge as and how it is yielded. Being man, being woman, being alive, being dead, none of these things are relevant. They were all relevant at that time. when those extensions were the only extensions that were present within the society. Once accuracy of knowledge can be determined, then that accuracy of knowledge becomes the actual source and nothing else. We turn to the narration of our blessed Imam. Now, when you look at the tribulations of Karbala, you find that there is a lot of grief, a lot of trauma, a lot of tribulation. And we do injustice at times to the family of Imam Hussein Salamullah alayhi by saying this is authentic and this is inauthentic. Now I know we need to establish authenticity of events before we narrate them. But when we go down on that route, we will find that majority of those things that we narrate cannot be sourced accurately. You can bring some level of criticism. What that does is it undermines the gravity of that tragedy, because we are failing to see that the blessed Imam and his family felt pain, deep pain. And that pain, if it is conveyed through taking poetic license by not attributing anything that is blatantly untrue, but expression of emotion, then that is well acceptable and it is accurate. Now, I've seen in my life that the pain that we feel greatest is at infant suffering. Why? Because babies and infants are innocent. They are helpless. The parents are the people who are taking care of them, and they are in the protection of their parents. Now, Hazrat Abbas's falling was no ordinary thing. It broke the back of Imam Hussein. Hazrat Ali Akbar's falling shredded his heart. But what we find in Asghar is that Imam loses himself. Whether Imam was standing or Imam was sitting, Asghar's pain was so heavy upon his heart. And that is because of the innocence of this helpless child. Now, I don't know, do you remember the days in which our children were little babies? Now imagine a father carrying his baby, bidding him farewell, and an arrow slits that child's neck from ear to ear. And the other thing that tore Imam apart were the innocent pleas of her little Sakina. Hamid ibn Muslim says that as the enemies called upon him, come and fight with us, he stood there next to his steed. The wind of the desert blew the hem of his garment from side to side. There I saw, emerging from a tent, a child of barely 3 or 4. With trembling legs, she advances behind Hussein. She tugs at the base of his garment. He turns around and she says, Ya abata unzur ilayya. Oh father, look at me. I die of thirst. Hamid ibn Muslim says he cried profusely. And I asked, who is this? And I was told, it is the youngest child of Hussein. Now come with me for 2 more minutes. This child is an innocent child. I don't think Imam Hussein was able to let go of her, and that's why he was constantly trying to reach the Al-Qama to get some water for her. In any case, the child doesn't understand that. She's an innocent child. She is perplexed, she is confused. She is wondering what is happening. They were all here. Where have they gone? The tents have been looted. The women are crying. Strange man came and attacked our household. A state of confusion. From time to time, she would ask, where has my father gone? Where has my uncle gone? Where has my brother gone? They would say, they have gone away somewhere and they will come back. Now I've heard this, and as I said in that prelude, it is the sentiment I wish to convey. In the ruins of Sham, there was a nest in which little birds had hatched. The parent bird would go away in the morning and would come back in the later part of the day and feed its children. So Sakina asked, why do they go away and why do they come back? So she was told that they go away to fetch food for their young ones. And then they come back and feed their young ones. She said, when will my father come back? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين.
In captivity, Sakina remembered the chest that she used to find peace on, the chest that she used to sleep on. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Zinda mein sakina ko yaad aaya wo sina. Zinda mein sakina ko yaad aaya wo sina. Zinda mein sakina ko yaad aaya wo sina. Zinda mein sakina ko yaad. جس سینے پہ سوتی تھی ہائے ہائے جس سینے پہ سوتی تھی معصوم سکینہ زندہ میں سکینہ کو یاد آیا وہ سینہ زندہ میں سکینہ کو یا وہ سینہ کر رحم ذرا ظالم بابا کو نہ روؤں گی میں گود میں مادر کی آرام سے سوؤں گی بے رحم لعینوں نے آئے بے رحم لعینوں نے فریاد سنی نا زندہ میں سکینہ کو یاد آیا وہ سینہ زندہ میں سکینہ یاد آیا سہمی ہوئی سکینہ ہر سمت دوڑتی تھی امو مجھے بچا لو بس یہ پکارتی تھی در چھینتا ہے میرے ہائے ہائے در چھینتا ہے میرے یہ شمر کمینہ زندہ میں سکینہ کو یاد یاد آیا وہ سینہ یاد آئے تماچے بھی جلتے ہوئے خیمے بھی اندھیری کوٹھری میں یاد آیا ہے اصغر بھی دیواروں سے ٹکرا کے ہائے ہائے دیواروں سے ٹکرا کے روتی ہے سکینہ زندہ میں کینہ کو یاد آیا وہ سینہ زندہ میں یاد آیا وہ سینہ اے دست اجل رک جا بیمار کو آنے دے بابا کے لیے کوئی پیغام سنانے دے شاید میری تربت پہ ہائے ہائے شاید میری تربت پہ وہ آئے کبھی نہ زندہ میں سکینہ کو یاد آئے نہ زندہ میں یاد آیا وہ سینہ عابد کی ہے مجبوری ناراض نہ تم ہونا اس میلے ہی کرتے میں آرام سے تم سونا پہنا تھا کفن تجھ کو ہائے ہائے پہنا تھا کفن تجھ کو گر ہوتا مدینہ زندہ میں سکینہ کو یاد آیا وہ سینہ زندہ میں یا وہ سینہ ہر وقت چمکتا تھا کربل میں مدینے میں تعویذ کی مانند تھا شبیر کے سینے پہ گم ہو گیا وہ کیسے ہائے ہائے گم ہو گیا وہ کیسے زندہ میں نگینہ زندہ میں سکینہ کو یاد آیا وہ سینہ زندہ میں سکینہ یاد آیا وہ سینہ جس سینے پہ سوتی تھی ہائے ہائے جس سینے پہ سوتی تھی معصوم سکینہ زندہ میں سکینہ کو یاد آیا وہ سینہ فاتحہ السلام علیکم یا نبی اللہ السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ السلام علیکم یا امیر المؤمنین السلام علیکم یا فاطمة الزہراء سیدتی نساء العالمین السلام علیکم یا خدیجة الکبریٰ ام المؤمنین السلام علیکم یا ایہا الحسن المجتبى السلام علیکم یا ابا عبد اللہ وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك وأناخت برحلك عليك مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أخوات الحسين. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء وأسراء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا مولا، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا، كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء. سلام الله على آبائك السبعة وأبنائك الأربعة وعلى أختك فاطمة المعصومة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن، يا صاحب العصر والزمان، سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامي وإمام الإنس والجان. أجر الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك، واجعلنا من أوانك وأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.